Today on the MotoMan podcast, we're sitting down with the man who didn't get handed a racing career. He had to finance it, earn it, and survive it.
When Corvette Racing, the entity, began to race in 99. 99 and 2000, we weren't doing all the races.
And the cost wasn't just time. It was a burden that followed him for years.
Working to pay off the debt. I'd accumulated probably about $50,000 in debt.
When he explains what it takes to win, he doesn't just give you mythology. He gives you the grind that decides everything.
The team worked on pit stops, and we started the 2001 season much more confident.
And when it pays off, the victory part feels unreal, like icons stepping into your frame.
Sir Jackie is presenting us with Rolex watches for winning, and here's Dale Sr. on the podium with us.
This is Ron Fellows. Built, not bought. I have been very, very excited to meet you. I'll admit I'm fangirling.
This isn't like Chicken Man, though, right? There's no theme song going on?
No, there's no Chicken Man.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Although maybe that's a new business for me. Because there's a lot of
You need to come up with a
here.
thing. MotoMan, he's everywhere. One of those.
This is a branding guy. I like this guy already. No wonder why you've raced cars all over the world and have your name on race schools and I don't.
Sorry.
So, no, there's the Canadian in you.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
had to. You're not even a minute in and the sorry came out. Okay, so I'll admit, I'm fangirling a little bit hanging out with you.
Okay.
I followed your career for a while.
Don't
Very
be,
excited
anyway.
about the Corvette racing stuff. We'll get there. We'll get there. But we got to start at the beginning. Yeah, you grew up in the shadow of Motown. You grew up over the river in Windsor.
Born there.
Born
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
How does a kid that was born in Windsor go from there to winning Le Mans, Daytona, Sebring, running race schools, owning part of a racetrack? How do we get there?
I don't know.
Okay, interview over. We're done.
Yeah, no, the influence, we travel around a little bit. Well, born in Windsor, and my dad was an Anglican minister. Episcopalian would be the U.S. And yeah, so we went from Windsor, a couple of communities in southwestern Ontario, a few years, and my dad was at a parish in Port Huron, Michigan. Mm-hmm. Then in 1969, I am the oldest of five. Mm-hmm. Packed up the family and moved to the Toronto area. And my uncle was my mom's brother. He rallied. He had some pretty cool rally cars.
And he wasn't a minister.
No, he was not a minister.
He was the black sheep of the family.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, the youngest of the McLaren clan. Yes, spelled the right way. And and I've used the term before, but the epiphany moment for an 11-year-old was here. Very close to this actual spot in September of 1969.
For the avoidance of doubt, we are at what used to be called Mosport, now Canadian Tire
Motorsport Park. And this is where the grandstands were. And we came to the Canadian Grand Prix and sat in the grandstands, and it was, I got to get on the other side of the fence.
So was this your uncle brought you here?
Yeah, my uncle and a buddy of his, They both rallied, and my brother Rob, so it was the four of us. Yeah, up Old Dark 30, and we lived in the Brampton area, suburb of Toronto. Yeah, and then Bramalea, and got here nice and early. Got a spot right at the top of the grandstand, and yeah, when the cars came up for warm up, it was just absolutely magic.
You had no interest in cars prior to that?
No, I was
going on.
Yeah, no, I for sure I did. Yeah, it was in the soul. Okay, I want to make a living racing cars. At 11 years old, the path was very difficult in
So
terms
what
of, and it's all about money and opportunity.
that is the understatement of the century. But
Yeah.
what is, at 11 years old, what do you start doing to become a car kid?
It was all about racing. Certainly followed really, followed most of the series that would come to then Mosport, with Can-Am, Trans Am. There was obviously Formula One, and followed it religiously, and started saving money to buy a go-kart. There was a kart track in the Whitby area, which is not far from here,
Make
and
honey there. I found that out yesterday.
yeah,
You can get homemade honey in Whitby.
okay. There used to be a big kart track in Whitby. It was a concession kart, as in you show up, pay, do laps, and it turned out in Georgetown, Ontario, which is not far from where we lived, there was also a kart track that raced. They had Saturday night racing, and so that was our first influence. Took about 4 years to save enough money to get a kart, and then we essentially started racing in Georgetown, Ontario, at the North Halton Kart Club, and then raced at Goodwood, which still exists to this day. It's in the Stouffville area. Goodwood
Ontario,
racetrack. Yeah.
Canada,
Yes.
not Chichester.
No.
Big difference.
Big difference. Yeah, this is a kart track.
You realize it's almost, I keep on going back to this whole religious theme, it's almost ordained that you're a car guy because you grew up in Brampton. They manufacture Chryslers there or Dodges there.
Yeah.
And then you're racing close to Georgetown where they make Lexus crossovers. Granted, not the fastest things in the world, but you grew up in car towns, kind of.
Well, there's the auto industry is huge in the province of Ontario.
Very
in
much
general. So, whether it's, the racetrack is 25 minutes from GM Canada's headquarters.
Joshua.
So, yeah.
Prepare to be amazed.
Okay.
What people don't understand is the sign. I'm driving around, hanging around for a week here in Canada, and they got the Oshawa sign. Every time you go in and out of Oshawa, we went to a car show this weekend in Oshawa.
Okay.
A very unusual town, I will tell you. And you drive into the town, and it says underneath, "Welcome to Oshawa. Prepare to be amazed." And I'm still trying to figure out what the amazing part is.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I would have thought it would have been some hockey player reference.
well, there's a farmer here that's got a great airstrip and 2 airplanes. I thought that was it.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your dad here for a minute.
Okay.
He's a minister.
Yes.
Ministers, unless they have like a rock band church or named Joel Osteen, don't really make a lot of money.
No.
So did you understand this whole concept about it
No.
takes money to get a racing, or did your dad sit you down and say, we don't have the money for this?
Yeah, no, both my mom and dad. My mom was full-time looking after the household. And she had been teaching prior to that, prior to having my kids. So
Wow.
my dad was, I mean, in terms of the plenty of moral support, but yeah, that was one of the first things, like, we don't have he quickly figured out
Yeah.
that
So he
once I went from karts and was trying to get into then Formula Ford, Formula 1600, we don't have the money to do this. This is a
you thing, not an us thing.
Yeah, and you might think about an alternative to wanting to make a living racing cars.
And
you need a backup plan, because
yeah.
he could see the funding required to get yourself in a position to get hired.
To get to a certain level, like
Yeah.
you have or other people, you're talking harder than the NBA at that point.
Yeah,
Super
yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, the sneakers and shorts are really expensive.
yes, they are. Well, and I'm surprised. So your parents didn't sit you down. Their first concern was the money. They didn't think, well, you're going to kill yourself doing this.
No, it was less about that side of it. It was more about the difficulties and the frustration likely to be experienced by not getting the opportunity Plenty
He
of
wasn't so concerned about the health issues because he realized it was such a small chance.
yeah. That was that would be very accurate to say.
I felt your father in
Yes,
that
yes.
moment right there.
Yes,
So you got your
yes.
kart racing in Ontario.
Yep.
And where do you step up from there?
My again back to the family connection. My uncle Charles ended up he and a buddy ended up buying a B sedan Datsun 510. So that's
Great
both.
car.
Yeah, great car. So that's what both my brother and I got our Rob. He and I got our racing license in and um, raced at Shannonville, and then my first sort of full on not a novice race was at Circuit Mont Tremblant.
Quebec.
Yeah, and it was daunting to say the least.
Why
And,
is that? Why was it daunting?
It's a lot like Canadian Tire Motorsport Park in terms of layout. It's got lots of elevation. It's just sharper elevation, not quite as high speed, but an absolutely awesome circuit. And so that was my very first race.
And
in
are
the
you still
510.
funding yourself at this point?
Yes, getting some help from my uncle was his car,
Yeah.
and no, I was paying for tires and fuel.
And how old were you at this point?
19. Yeah.
So what were you doing to pay for tires and gas?
Funny
That's
you
the
should
big
ask.
question.
Yes. So yes, I didn't finish high school. I began working. I had a summer job working for a natural gas company that they had a construction component to it, and I was essentially started as a laborer, and then figured out, yeah, you can make pretty good money doing this. This would help fund my racing. So I stayed on after one of the summers as a summer student and worked my way into becoming a machine operator. I'm sort of like, okay, what's the highest paying here? And I don't want to be a welder. Machine operator, that's me. And anyway, so I began as a machine operator digging trench, at a lot of the new construction areas that's installing that would install natural gas for a suburban community. So that's what we did.
And your teacher mother, she did not have a heart attack about this?
She's still alive. That's something.
Yeah.
No, she did have a sense of humor. She claims she doesn't remember this, but I'll fast forward a few years. So I did this this natural gas work for almost 10 years, and got myself in a pile of debt, and then along came the Players GM series. So in the mid '80s, three of the tobacco companies began supporting Canadian series, and that they were great opportunities. So in '86, the General Motors got together and put together a series with basically showroom stock Camaros and Firebirds, and it paid. And the cars were $20,000 ready to race, and they paid $6,000 to win. This is 1986.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Like a
So-
new Chevy back then, like a Caprice was $10,000, $11,000.
Yeah, this was what was then the IROCs and
In New York and New Jersey, we had a different term for IROC. I'll leave it at that.
okay. Well, yeah, right. Yes. Off air. Well, I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of this
Yeah.
one.
I'm sure you know what it is.
Yes.
Now, before we get back,
yeah.
before we get into these GM stuff, you said you got into a pile of debt.
Yeah.
Was the debt primarily from buying gas and tires?
Buying a car. I bought so in that couple of years into my full-time work with the natural gas company, I bought a new Formula 1600, and it was fully financed by a bank, which
A race car financed by a bank?
yeah, which was probably should have been a red flag that maybe this isn't the best Formula 1600 to be
No.
buying when somebody's able to organize the financing. But I jumped at it anyway. And yeah, and then you got to get the motor updated, and work on the car and tires, and got to figure out how to transport it. So trailer and borrow my mother's station wagon. Yeah,
So you bought a car and a trailer and all the parts and all the tires.
yeah.
And you were how old at this point?
This would be 81 or 2. Yeah, so what's that? 20, yeah, 23, 24 years old.
So young guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I did have a little bit of time in a 1600 and 79. That was where I get into it with a guy by the name of Wayne Penny, and the first car I bought was an old Lotus
Now you're talking
Formula
high speed.
1600. Yeah. So, and we updated it and did some racing in 79, and really enjoyed it. And I thought, this is,
What did that cost you?
I can't remember, but I know how much
You
debt I got into. Yeah.
But you didn't finance that one.
No,
Finance the Formula.
no, I didn't. It was the new car that I bought in 1981. Yeah, that was
Okay, so
financed.
you're winning anything at this point?
We're front runner. Yeah, front runner, but just essentially, club racing, and it was, there was Ludwig Heimer Jr. I'm trying to think who else. Davy Jones was he was 16 years old and came up to race. And it was a pretty healthy, competitive field back then. It was the only sort of open wheel rank that you could go from karts to cars. And it was what hurt my ability to continue beyond 1981, besides not having enough money, was 1600. The 1600, then Formula Ford, was a support race at the Grand Prix. A number of the races here. So you had something to sell when you're on big spectator events. And in 1982, Formula 2000 was introduced in this country, and 1600 just became a club race, and I couldn't afford to sell this and get much money for it and jump into Formula 2000. So I ended up selling working to pay off the debt. And I'd accumulated probably about $50,000 in debt
in the 80s.
Early 80s. Yes, you remember what interest rates were back then? I know what they were.
12-13%.
Yeah, almost twice that.
And 50 grand, which you're talking 100 grand today for a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
Which, we can go off into a tangent, but that's what kids are getting school debt for, and not even getting a cool race car out of it.
No.
You at least got a race car out of it.
Well, I got a race car that was now essentially obsolete from being part of a series that was on big spectator events. They switched to Formula 2000, and I couldn't afford to make that upgrade.
So where'd you go from there?
It just kept working. I just continued to work at the gas company, trying to pay it off for the debt.
So you got out of racing completely?
I couldn't afford to.
At 20?
22 or 3, yeah.
You were done.
Yeah,
and how long were you working just full-time as the man at an oil company?
The gas company, it was until winter of 85. Yeah, I ended up meeting Richard Spinard he was starting a new racing school at a track about an hour or so from here, Shannonville. And he had these Formula 2000 cars, and they had a racing school series, and I thought I could do that. So I went to his school and got into his runoff for to win a full season, and I didn't win that. I got to the final 6, and it was 2 days of drivers, and I got down to the final 6, and I didn't win. But Richard, I did end up doing a couple of school races that I could afford, and did win. But
now,
I was then out of money.
School races. You're taking classes and doing the race.
Well, they would also have it very popular. Skip Barber did, Jim Russell did it, where you could essentially, it's a arrive and drive program where you do the school, you do lapping days, and then they would also have a school series. So essentially, they provide all the cars. You show up, pay your money, race, and at the end there was the carrot was the winner of the championship would get 3 races in the Formula 2000 series. There'd be some, and all the racing schools would do some sort of a program where there's some sort of carrot at the end of it for the champion. But
So this is a much cheaper way to get into racing, and you have
indeed,
this blue sky if you win the lottery.
yes. But the blue sky lottery for me was, I hit it off with Richard. He hired me to work at his racing school.
So you left the oil
I
gas
left
business.
after 9.5 years. I quit. Yes, the gas company, the natural gas company, and became an instructor at Richard's school, and it helped. There were 2 things. Number one, I was quick in a race car. I had no idea why. Being able to analyze others, I learned about that being able to better define my own technique in being able to when you're basically teaching others, and then you're also meeting for some of the corporate days you're meeting potential sponsor influencers, and that was sort of the next thing to happen, as well as this showroom stock series that Players and General Motors put on.
So let's check in with your personal life at this point.
Okay.
So how old are we? 25, 26 at that point?
Yep.
Okay, 25, 26. Are you married? Do
No.
you have kids? So you're,
No.
so you're
Single.
basically a deadbeat.
Yeah, basically deadbeat. Living at home. Yeah.
Oh, you were living at
Oh,
home?
yes.
You're working at the oil and gas place and you're
I
living
lived.
at home?
Yeah, it was all I could afford to do. My mother was very tolerant. Yes.
Your mother's a saint.
Yes.
So
And when I began working at the gas company, I ended up. My parents had divorced in the early '80s, so my dad was actually in the Belleville area, which is near where this track at Shannoville was. I ended up living with he and his second wife in that Belleville area briefly when I was working at the racing school.
So how long did it take you to pay off the debt?
But
lot of money.
yeah, I'm thinking it was 1989 or 90 when I finally paid it off.
Oh, it took
But
you
I was
9 years.
I still raced because the next the Camaro that I got for the 1986
Yeah.
series, was financed.
So basically you were bailing out the boat with a hole in the bottom.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Dave Ramsey?
No.
He's a big he's like one of the top radio hosts in in Canada too. He teaches a debt-free lifestyle.
Okay.
And like you, I learned it the hard way.
Yes.
But now, no more bailing out the boat with a hole in the bottom.
Well, that was my wife was very, very good at that. Yes, she helped turn me around.
When did she come around?
Oh, 1990. Yeah.
Okay, so she meets a racing school instructor. That's when she
I was racing at that point. When the Players GM series started in '86, there was also the Rothmans was involved with Porsche. They had a 944 turbo cup car,
the car well.
spec car, and another tobacco company, Export, was supporting Formula 2000. So we had these 3 fantastic championships in Canada that paid anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000 to win.
But you still had to buy your own car.
You did, or in the case of I couldn't afford to buy a Porsche 944 turbo, so I ended up driving for a couple of different dealers, Pfaff being one of them, and then wealthy guys that own the cars. So I actually got hired to drive, but the focus for me was on the Players GM series. My brother and I started a team in our own team in '88.
That's when you bought was it Camaro?
Camaros, yes, and we ended up working at the racing school. I met a guy that owned an agency, and he was instrumental in getting Sunoco Canada back then involved, and on the stack of proposals he recognized my name from having met me at the racing school, called me, and we ended up getting Sunoco as a sponsor. and then ended up meeting in '86. I won one of the two big races for that Players GM series. They had two races that were live TV on then CTV Wide World Sports, and I won the Toronto, or sorry, the IndyCar race on the San Air Trial, if you can believe that. So that was kind of a difference maker. And there was a president of a mutual fund company who was involved in racing, getting involved in IndyCar as well. And he saw me race. He met me after the race, and he began to help me as well. So that's where.
On this part, we're getting to the point of your career where you're racing full time, you're winning. How much of the business part did you understand? Like, were you the one going and trying to get sponsors?
Oh yeah.
So you understood that part.
Yeah. No, I think that was something that I was very passionate about in terms of being able to essentially get across that we're gonna do everything we can for you and corporation and those who you bring out to host, and you're gonna every single event you will get the best. Ron Fellows and his brother then, and yeah, I think the passion came through in the messaging, and certainly when we began winning on a regular basis in 1988, and I was able to essentially put together a deck for Sunoco and for McKinsey Financial then, just showing them the value of from the broadcasts and essentially getting more money.
So true or false, would you consider yourself a businessman first or a race car driver first?
Oh no, I'm a racing driver first. Yeah, but you just did whatever you had to do to get the money, within reason, obviously. But just working relationships and talking to them about the dream of racing.
So I get that part, but what I'd never understood, and this is coming from a guy who makes a portion of his income on sponsorship.
Yep.
Is there a metric when you're going to these guys, especially in the early days where you're smaller?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if I put Michelin on my racetrack or on my race car, people are going to go out and buy Michelin tires.
Right.
Is there a sales pitch that you can say that this is the exposure we have and this is what we can get people in the stores? Or?
That's where it starts, but it is without a doubt a personal and emotional connection.
You're selling them the dream on, hey, I could be part of a race team.
Yep.
People are excited about the race team.
That's exactly right. And my dream was to get into I dabbled in open wheel stuff, but I was back then too tall for those cars. And it was actually the longtime owner of this facility, Harvey Hudis, who said, "Ron, forget about open wheel racing. Look at sports car racing. Their manufacturers are there. They're competing regularly. If you're any good, they'll find you." That was the advice. So then it was with success that I had in that Players GM series, winning a championship. I got to do a few races in the Trans Am series, and I managed to win a race with Jack Roush, and that led to the next connection, which was in '90. I didn't have a ride, and I went to the very first Trans Am race and essentially begged Jack Roush for something, anything, and he said, "All right, you did good for us last year," because I did 3 races, and I had some sponsorship from McKinsey Financial and Sunoco Canada to make that happen. And
before you press on to this, did you actually make money on that investment to the '88 GM car you bought, the Camaro? From all the wins, did it actually work out that you made money on?
Oh yeah. No, in '80, when I won the championship in '89, I think my winnings were about 70.
Okay, so in all my years of doing this, I've never had a well-known race car driver break it out like that. Is it possible today
No.
for? Oh, so you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
And why is it not possible today for someone to duplicate that?
Because the costs associated with competing at the right now are so high versus the return.
$20,000 car doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. Well, even in today's money, that showroom stock Camaro is 75. So what's that $6,000 worth? Is that where are we going to race a $75,000 car that's going to pay $20,000 to win? Yeah.
That's very sobering numbers.
Yeah. So, it's.
And can you really put the $75,000 car on the track without putting more money into it?
Well, no, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And if the series is marketed well, yeah, there's you're able to sell the fact that you're showcasing your team and and obviously your sponsors on TV at large spectator events. So that's the appeal. But we don't have that as much as we did. Certainly in Canada, it continues to be a problem when we essentially tobacco was legislated out of
Especially
sponsorship.
in Canada.
Yeah, we
Or so.
haven't really recovered, and that's our fault.
So it's a double whammy. It's
Yeah.
not just the cost of the car increased,
Yeah.
but you've cut off half of your
Mhm.
sponsorship opportunities. Would you say there are other types of racing that have become affordable? Or competition, shall I say?
Yeah. No, we have in Canada
To make money, not just get out there.
No,
and
not
lap
make
the day.
money. No, it's really about what's relatively affordable that I can get myself in, showcase my abilities, and look at can I turn that into another opportunity? And 1600 remains affordable entry-level open wheel racing in this country. The issue is, all right, so you win a championship in 1600, and it's an $80,000 or $100,000 season, which is not bad. Where do you go from there? What's the next step?
So there
$300,000
really
or
is not- it's like
$400,000.
there's a ceiling, and that's it.
Yeah, you got to go. It's off to the U.S. or Europe, and that's tough.
All of us here at MotoMan are super excited to not only have the podcast back, but for it to be its own show. And there, we look to you for a little assistance. Can you help us grow the show? Two really easy ways to do that. First and foremost, if you're reaching out via YouTube or other streaming platforms, you click on subscribe, notifications, or more importantly, share these episodes with your friends, especially on Reddit. Now, if you're downloading these episodes, listening via podcast platforms, we'd ask you to rate us. The good stars are wonderful, but leaving a written review would be even better, especially sharing who was your favorite guest. So with that, I am incredibly grateful for your assistance in help growing this. And now, back to the episode.
True or false? Is there an age cap where you got to get started? If you don't get started by a certain time, you're not getting into racing professionally?
I don't know if it's. I mean, you can get into racing at any age, but
Yeah, but
to be able to make
money,
it, to make a living at it, you're in Max Verstappen is the generational talent who sort of he changed how he essentially changed how team owners looked at young talent.
How so?
Because he was in a Formula One car as a teenager, and he was outstanding. So,
But he had to have an on-ramp at an
yes, he
incredibly
did.
young age.
Yes, he did.
Like Hamilton and others.
Yes, they did.
That's really
Yeah.
my question.
No.
Do you have to be like a guy like that, starting in go-karts with parents that can afford that, to be able to get to making money in
Yep.
racing?
Yeah, and at every level, and I think if you look at it historically, nothing is at every level. Or let's go back. It's at every generation there is every driver who was successful who didn't come from big family money has similar stories about connections, people helping them. There was never a fancy proposal. It was knowing somebody who knew somebody who could help
And
provide.
that's possible today.
It's still possible. Yep.
Okay, so we've
It's
given
just
some
more
good hope
difficult
here.
because the money is
It's so
uh,
astronomical.
and we don't have the same platforms in Canada like they do in the U.S. in order to, or Europe for that matter, and that's on us. We as Canadian stakeholders, we haven't done enough. So
But the questions I'm asking you, it's more of a global question,
Right.
not just a Canadian question.
No,
Is it
no,
still
true.
possible globally to start without having going in go-karts at like 8 years old and having a parent that could have
Yeah, no, you got to be you've got to, in order to, you're not going to get looked at if you're in your late 20s trying to get a ride in Formula 2 and looking at Formula 1.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to happen.
I was hoping we'd do this. You'd get me into a Corvette.
That we can do.
No, I want to get paid to drive the Corvette. That's the difference. I don't want to buy one.
You might be able to twist my arm and get a chance to drive it and buy me a cup of coffee.
Here, well, I'll get you some from Tim Hortons. That's cheaper.
There you go.
Okay, so let's get away from the Corvettes. Talk to Mr. Ford. We're talking about Roush.
So Jack was very helpful. He said, I think I can get you, 2/3 of the schedule. We got some money from Motocraft that I can, and he was already running a 4-car team. So I was the 5th car for 9 or 10 races. And he said, there's a company that's going to help. It's called AER Manufacturing. They're in Addison, Texas, a suburb of Dallas, and really nice people. And if they like you, they might stick with you.
Something tells me we have a hell of a ride coming up.
Yes. Yeah. So Bob and Helen McGraw from the Dallas area, it's Bob's father had a small engine remanufacturing business, and Bob grew the business into a tremendous engine remanufacturing and small components and contracts with OEs. And anyway, we met in 1990 at the Dallas event, and sure enough, we kind of hit it off. So,
A couple of Texans and a kid from Canada.
From the Toronto area.
That sounds like the beginning of a bad joke.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, the short version is yes, AER Manufacturing stuck with Ron even when he went to become a Chevy driver, and continues to this day. 32 years later, they're now helping my son with his racing in the Canadian NASCAR series. So
talk about sticking with you.
Yep.
I'm surprised you don't live in Texas.
We did look at that, yes. But there's some neat stories along the way where the first win for Corvette racing in 2000 was at Texas Motor Speedway on the Roval. And that was a race that when we, and I'm jumping around here, but when Corvette racing, the entity began to race in 99 and 2000, we weren't doing all the races. We were doing some of the American Le Mans Series races, and obviously cherry picking the big ones, including Le Mans 2000. Anyway, 99 never won a race. 2000, we got to Le Mans for the first time. We were on the wrong end of the closest finish, the Rolex 24 for an overall win. And we're now, I believe it was about this time in 2000 where we weren't going to go to the Corvette racing was not going to go to Texas Motor Speedway for the race. And I pleaded with the GM racing bosses, her official, Joe Negri, that guys, we need to go there because the teams we're racing against, and it was the Orca, Dodge, Porsche, et cetera, in GT1. This was a new track for everybody, and I said, hey, nobody's got they have no information on to go back on, and we got a great team here. We can go there and get a win. well, we just don't have the money. What do we need? So we need this number to make it happen. I call up Bob at AER.
What's the number?
I'm not going to say. You'd be surprised how small it was. But anyway,
Small.
yeah, it wasn't. I shouldn't say that. It was it would be a big number then. Anyway, it was in today's money, it would be
Pennies.
no, it wasn't pennies, but it would be, the cost to field one of these cars now is just in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. In comparison,
It
yes.
would be pennies in
Yes,
comparison.
yes,
today.
yes, true enough.
Okay, so
But-
before we get into the whole Corvette racing,
Okay,
you have a huge part of the story we're missing before we get to Corvettes.
yeah,
What happened between AER and Corvettes? There's a whole chapter.
yeah, there kind of is, yeah. So in '90, as the I did and again I'd done 3 races with Roush in '89 and won one, and 1990 close, never won a race. The Chevy Berettas were dominant that year with Tommy Kendall and Chris Neifel.
Tommy Kendall, good friend, good guy.
Yep. Chris Neifel became a teammate at Corvette Racing with me. And anyway, we Ford ended up pulling out at the end of '90, and 91 they had quite a healthy contingency program set up. But that's what so basically '91 I did most of the series with Jack, and it was funding from Mackenzie Financial here in Canada, AER in Texas, and the Ford contingency money that was, I think it paid, it wasn't about winning it, but being the first Ford. And I think it was maybe 20 grand, 15 grand. It paid top 3 if you're the top 3 Fords in the field.
So this is fascinating. Here you are now getting a bit more mature in the industry.
Yeah.
You're more well known in the industry. You're working with some of the heavyweights, but you're creating this potpourri of sponsorships of some of their people as well as people that have been with you from early on.
My wife Linda was very helpful in getting my finances better organized, and
So a good partner.
oh yeah,
And not just
oh, yeah,
not just the politically correct
to
term,
this-
but she really was a good partner.
to this day, yes, in terms of getting the she's just a lot better organized than I am when it comes to that, and keeping on track of the checkbook. And I would just spend whatever
As you
was
have
it-
demonstrated with all the
yes,
debt.
to do whatever, if I believed that this was an opportunity and a chance worth taking, I would spend whatever I
But
could
at
get my
this
hands
point,
on.
you're out of debt. You paid off
Yeah,
the 50 grand,
yes,
no
yes,
more
yes,
Camaros,
you're
you're
right.
buying on your own
No, I
money.
still had one car that was I still had one car that was financed, one Camaro,
A race car?
Yep.
Really?
which I still have to this day with my championship car from '89, which I have. The
But-
only reason I
But
kept
you
it
paid
was
it off finally.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only
otherwise
reason
I'd
I-
slap you across the
really
face
that's
right
the only reason I kept it, was because I owed money on it.
now. It's honest.
Yeah. So and it turns out it's we got it restored and it actually runs my.
It's a stupid
Anyway.
question. You know what we haven't covered at all in this discussion? Are you a car guy? Do you have classic cars at home? Do you have like a 911? Street car?
A 911.
Yes, a 911.
Shh.
Canadians.
MotoMan. You see these Chevy bow tie
Yeah, I see.
tattooed on?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, no. No, I have. I got a couple of Corvettes. There's the 2007 that was the special edition with my name on it, and it's in Detroit. But I'll get my hands on it to bring it back across the border at some point. When I was inducted into the Corvette Hall of Fame, they did a special edition 2011 Z06 with the Z07 package, and he was actually the opposite color combination.
I
It had-
remember that car.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's red with white stripes, and in the shop here is the white one with the red
Any
stripes.
classic cars at all besides this car you still have
No.
financed?
No,
Nothing.
it's just I've just been so busy with racing and the business side, transitioning from out of the race car to the school in Nevada. That was a quick transition. And again, just very, very fortunate that happened.
Back
So-
in the 90s that happened?
No, that happened in
recent.
2008.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Spring Mountain, it wasn't around in the 90s.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay,
So anyway,
so you had a little detour in a different kind of racing.
Yeah.
What happened there?
well, that was good stuff. It was the Trans Am series. Yeah, no, it was a ton of fun. So I ended up so at the end of '91, Jack basically got out of the Trans Am series because it just wasn't good business for him. You know, it was helpful for me, but it just didn't generate enough money in order to justify the effort. He needed a factory deal. So mind you, the Ford contingency money carried on, and I ended up meeting Tom Gloy, and I drove for him for 3 seasons, and he had Ford connections, and so I drove for Tom 92, 93, 94, and never won a championship. We won a bunch of races, but then coincidentally, coincidentally, it's actually a cool next phase to my career. One of the most important races to win is the Detroit Trans Am race. It was part of the IndyCar weekend. I think even in Formula One in the past. Anyway, so '94. I won the Trans Am race. It was on Belle Isle that year, and it was I think it was Chevy sponsored it, so it was the Chevy 200 or something. And the head of GM Racing is presenting me the trophy, and he literally on the podium asked me, "How do I get you in a Chevy?" And
That's
of course,
quite a
I had.
job interview.
What's that?
That's quite a job interview.
Yeah, it was, and literally, he's handing me the trophy, and he's out of the side of his mouth. It was Herb Bushell. He's like, "How do we get you in a Chevy?" And I'm like, "All you got to do is ask.
All you got to do is write a check, buddy.
Just call me. Just call me." Yeah, because I had plenty of friends at GM of Canada because of the history with that Showroom Stock Series, and that's really in August of that year. Through some of the friends I had at GM of Canada, they contacted me and said, "Mr. Fischel would like you to come to Detroit and talk about becoming a Chevy driver." So I ended up becoming a Chevy driver and had a 3-year contract, bought a house.
Had
Yes.
kids come along at this point?
Yeah, we got kids.
So you became totally responsible at this point.
Yep, somewhat.
You're still not responsible.
Yeah.
That's part of your charge today.
No, exactly. Yes. And then from there, the Chevrolet pulled out of the Trans Am series, and
Did you go to NASCAR at some point?
yeah, I did. So that transition was, I did a cup race in '95, and I suddenly got fascinated by it. This is, there's a couple of road races in the Cup Series. There was one in the then Busch Series, now the Xfinity Series, and the Craftsman Truck Series, of which it's going to become Craftsman Truck Series again, starting in '23. They were doing Watkins Glen and I think Sonoma then. This is when I think the Truck Series started in '95. So a long way around the barn. The end of '96 season, I still have a year in my contract with Chevy. They pull out of the Trans Am series. It's like, oh. Historically, when a manufacturer pulls factory funding, it's a long time before they get back in. Fortunately, I was still under contract, and both Herb Fischel and Joe Negri were, we'll help you a little bit. So they introduced me to some people in the NASCAR community. Yeah, I got to try to do a little NASCAR. I ended up racing a Ferrari 333 here.
And you were just busting my balls about 911s.
It's a Ferrari. Sorry. And as close as I was going to get to a Formula One car, the 333 was an awesome
Yeah.
car. So yeah, I got the Andy Evans has owned the I think it was called World Sports Car back then, and he had bought this place, and they wanted to put a local guy, and he had a team as well, and they wanted to put a local driver in one of the 333s for the race, and called and asked if I wanted to do it.
And you were too kind. You took the bow ties off of your forehead to go drive the
I asked
Ferrari.
permission, and they said, "Sure, yeah, no, that'd be great for you." But 97 was another step in the right direction. I ended up I won a truck race at Watkins Glen, and then the WSC race here in 97 with my teammate was Rob Morgan. Got the pole, and we won the race in that 333, and it was one of the. It was interesting because I had the week before I was in a truck in a Chevy truck, racing truck, and I got the pole. But getting the pole here in a 333, yeah,
That's
that's
literally coming home with the homecoming queen as your wife. I mean, am I wrong?
He said, "Honey, not me. Blame MotoMan."
Well, she may be the homecoming queen. I've never met her. You weren't
No,
kind enough to bring her
yeah,
along.
no. Hey, listen. Like I married way up. Trust
I
me.
have no doubt in my mind.
Yes.
Yeah. Now I'm hearing about this whole story here.
Yeah. Anyway, the so I had a pretty good month of August in 97, and was asked to come see Herb and Joe in fact right after the race with the 333 here, and they said we're going to take a Corvette to Le Mans. We'd like you to be,
That's quite a
part of
jump
it.
from we're pulling funding to we want to take our most iconic vehicle to the longest, the longest or
toughest,
the most
all of the above.
ridiculous racing contest on the planet.
Absolutely. And my reaction was, "You want to do what?" "I'm in."
And tell me again, what year is this?
97.
97.
Yeah.
So
He
Corvette was-
said that the drawback is we're not gonna race it until 1999. We're gonna test for an entire season. But
is that unusual that they're going to test for an entire season?
no, probably not. But generally you would be racing something else.
Is that because there was just so much to lose to bring that kind of iconic name to a long distance race?
Yeah,
You really
it
want to
need-
get it right. You don't want to screw it up.
Yeah, exactly. And the connection I had with Chevy came through being hired by Buzz McCall, who was the owner of American Equipment Racing. They ran the Chevy Trans Am program. Buzz was a great guy. Buzz also helped me get into do a little bit of the NASCAR racing, and he ended up taking his abandoning the Trans Am effort and going full-time NASCAR as well. First in the Xfinity Series and then the Cup Series with Caterpillar sponsorship.
So really,
anyway.
it was this very unusual discussion of we want to take Corvette to Le Mans.
Yeah.
Kind of change your trajectory.
Why not?
Got you out of the Trans Am, got you out of the NASCAR, and focused you on long distance race car driving.
Well, and then also I got a new contract.
Well, that also helps. How many
Yes.
years did they give you with this?
I think I got another 3. Yeah, after that.
Okay.
Yep.
And how involved were you on the process? Because this is a whole new program for Chevrolet to go chasing the iconic brands of Europe on their home
Right.
turf. What kind of setting were you setting up the car, or were you just the driver?
I mean I was a driver, but did a lot of the testing. They used the team that they had a connection with for getting cars built, and in the I think there was an Oldsmobile they had in GTO back then. It was Pratt Miller, and I knew the Pratt Miller guys because my my Camaro Trans Am car was built by Pratt Miller. So and that was obviously one of the questions that came up was, okay, who's going to do the team? It's going to be Pratt Miller. Okay, cool. And so we began the testing late November of '97. The first time we tested was at Sebring. And Gary Pratt and I still joke about, this pickup truck, a trailer, a race car, and about 4 crew guys to do the first test
So
of the
literally
Corvette race
humble
car.
beginnings.
Oh
Wouldn't
yeah,
think
yeah.
that'd
Even
be the case.
for Pratt Miller, yeah, yeah.
Now,
Yeah, you look at the, them being in essentially in I'll call it an industrial strip mall to incredible headquarters, on the other side of the highway in the Wixom area.
so
So
that brings up a good question.
New
So
Hudson, I believe.
General Motors.
Yeah.
Big company. Lots of money, lots of diverse product.
Mm-hmm.
When they set their mind to doing something, they're incredible. They're unstoppable. But when they get in their own way, the product suffers, the company ROI suffers. Which GM did you see go into this project early on?
Nothing but success.
So they were like,
Yeah.
They let the engineers take
Yep.
over.
Yeah, and again, both Herb Fisher, Joe Negri had a lot of. Obviously, there's always risk involved when you're putting your eggs in in a basket of an entity that you are strictly providing the funding to, and hoping to get the results. But they both had enough faith in Gary Pratt and Jim Miller, who being inducted into the Corvette Hall of Fame this weekend, by the way, that they would get the job done. And it was I didn't have any doubt that we'd get there. And again, we tested the entire '98 season, and when I sat in Warren, Michigan, in Herb's office with he and Joe. And I'm sort of scratching my head because the GT category was a bit of a mess. And okay, what are we gonna run this Corvette in? And through the testing in '98, the rules changed a couple of times. We ended up with being able to add more aero, more Goodyear built us a bigger tire, increase the brake capacity. So there were updates as the rules changed, and they ended up with sort of a GTS/GT1 combination.
They don't do the GTS anymore, do they?
No. GT1 became GTE Pro and then GT Le Mans, and over the years. So, but the GT1 cars were phased out in 2009. That was the end of it. Those were quick cars. Quick cars,
what was
lightweight.
The progression you got there in the late '90s. You arguably this was the most successful portion of your career. You had some very high hits with this team. What were some of those?
Well, getting that first win in Texas in 2000 was monumental. And we got pole. It was ridiculous heat. It was like 115 degrees ambient, and the track temp was above 160. It was just, anyway, we got our first win in part because of AER Manufacturing helping out.
Still there.
Yeah, still there. Yeah.
Was McKenzie still there?
No. The president had retired at that point, so McKenzie was out. But AER was still involved, and again he enjoyed the challenge, and I think he also had enough respect for my ability to say, yeah, let's take a chance on this. And the AER on that car in 2000 is part of the first win for Corvette racing.
And where did you go on to from there? You've got some other big wins.
So that that was the first step was learning how to win. Check that box. Now, how do
you
we
learn how to win? What goes into learning how to win?
everything, all the preparation, everything from building speed into the car, building reliability, building consistency, pit stop practice, everything. Particularly for long distance races, the time spent in the pits. Too much time is obviously is a negative. So the team worked on pit stops, and we started the 2001 season much more confident, and that was the 2001 was really the breakout year. We won the Rolex 24 at Daytona overall, which I never thought we'd ever get in a position to do that again. And also had Dale Earnhardt Senior and Junior in the second car. So it was just
You're racing with royalty.
Yes, indeed.
What was that like?
It was game changing for me to spend time with both Senior and Junior. And Senior wanted me to drive his Cup cars. Yeah, that was through the time we got to know both of them, and tragically he was killed 3 weeks after our Rolex 24 win. But I'll never forget. Senior was he's an icon and someone you had just a ton of respect for, and a hero. And Sir Jackie Stewart was another for me. And in Victory Circle at Daytona in 2001, Sir Jackie is presenting us with Rolex watches for winning, and here's Dale Senior on the podium with us. We won overall, and they were second in the class, so we ended up on the podium together for the class win. And there wasn't a happier guy than Dale Senior in victory. That was amazing. The giant bear hug, and it's awesome. And
so basically, 11 years old, you saw Jesus at this racetrack. And however old you were then, 50 some odd or 40 some odd years old, you climbed Mount Hebron and looked down on Jesus.
Yeah, into my 40s. Yeah, I was when we started when the Corvette racing program started. I was 41. Yeah.
Did you get the tartan hat from Sir Jackie Stewart?
I did not.
You're a failure. Interview over.
Yeah, sorry.
Disappointed, man.
But anyway, the Earnhardt family connection, carried on from, obviously a tragic Daytona 500 in 2001, but it gets emotional for me to this day when Ty Norris called in spring 2003, and Steve Park had gotten hurt, and he said, Would you like to drive the Pennzoil car for Watkins Glen and Sonoma?
That is quite the honor.
We know that Dale Senior always wanted you to drive one of his cars, and it's like
can't say no to that.
Not at all. So yeah, we did, and I did a number of races in the Cup Series for DEI over the years. Didn't win one, but we came close a number of times with DEI. Did get to win a then nationwide race for Dale Jr. in Montreal in 2008, so we got part of that covered. But yeah, no, it was an absolute honor to do that. And again, it's just being part of the GM Chevy family was led to all of that, and getting an opportunity to I got to do a little bit of development driving of the Cadillac prototype in '98 as well, when they debuted in '99, and raced the Cadillac when they needed a third driver in World Challenge.
Now you say you termed it the GM racing family. You mentioned the thing about learning how to win, and it's not just going
Yeah.
fast; it's also like the pits,
Yeah, teamwork.
that kind of stuff.
Teamwork. Yep.
I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with Hendrick folk down in North Carolina,
There's a winning organization for you.
and a big portion of it is how they manage the pits.
Yep.
I mean, it's that they take pro athletes,
Yeah,
put them
manage.
in there.
Yep.
Did you
Yeah.
learn anything from them? Was it passed along, or is that something you all kind of did on your own?
No, I think it's interesting. I'm thinking it was 03 when that side of it began to change. There was obviously there was a lot more money in the Cup Series. They're coming in. They were on this kind of an upward trend in terms of the popularity. Along with popularity comes the sponsorship and money. And I remember Ty Norris talking about the amount of pit stop practice they did, and I'd seen it, and I'd go drive the pit stop car on occasion just to kind of do a little bit of practice for me too. But the the number of college football players that they were using, and I remember Ty saying something about we're in a bidding war for a right front tire guy with so and so team, and it's we're going to have to pay this guy X because we got to get him, and that was sort of the that's where I recall in that sort of early 2000s when that part of the game in NASCAR got stepped up. I mean, it's always been critical, but and it's an essential,
that's a big portion of it today.
Huge.
And then also as part of this whole GM family thing, they drafted you over to Cadillac to do some stuff with the Cadillac. And then obviously we've already discussed this Ron Fellows edition of a car. Did your racing experience now, you were there, 9 years or something like that. Spent a lot of time at General Motors. Did you actually have
longer than this. It was 9 or 10 years with Corvette. Yeah.
Okay, so Corvette.
Racing, yeah.
But with that 9 years of Corvette, did you have feedback or insight into the development of the street car?
Interesting, yes. Yeah, we got and that was a nice perk. The sixth generation production car, particularly the Z06. Tom Wallace, who was then chief engineer, had I got an opportunity, and so did Johnny, thinking others as well, but I got an opportunity to do some development driving for the Z06 and
what's involved? The engineers take you out and then you spend
No,
some
it's
time
the other way around. You that was the first time I did that. It was a shocker that there was a essentially on the right seat of this Z06 there was another racing seat, set of belts, and like a little table mounted off the dash, like a tiny little desk, and they bolted a little laptop in there. I was going to have a riding engineer.
Were you working with Tad Jukter at that point?
No, Tad was on the team, but Tad was part of the team.
So not just chief engineer, he was part of the racing team too.
No, this was the production site. So Tom Wallace was he was the chief engineer for Corvette in that era, which led to the development of the sixth generation ZR1. But yeah, I sort of remember meeting Taj. But anyway, the shocker for me was that I was going to have this development driving, and we were at VIR.
Hell of a track.
Yes. And I was going to have someone in the right seat, basically monitoring all the functions while I'm.
And did they tell you it's for insight into the production car, or just they wanted?
No, this is all production related. Yeah.
So you knew you were helping them develop the production car.
Yep.
It's a hell of a journey for a kid that was sitting in the stands that used to be here like a gazillion years ago.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Okay, so we got to shift gears back to where we are sitting right now, because that's actually part of your career, a big part of your career.
Part of the journey.
This is quite a facility.
Yeah.
What is your relationship with the facility?
It started, we'll go back half a step. So when I retired from Corvette racing in the end of 2008, the ZR1 Corvette was under development, coming out in 09, and Corvette wanted to be able to. We're looking at, we're producing a car with over 600 horsepower. We should have driver training as part of the ownership
You
experience.
should. And just to interject,
Yes,
Bob Lutz still has his ZR1. I just saw it
I'm not
40
surprised.
weeks ago.
He was keen on. So it was he and Tom Wallace, chief engineer, and the Corvette team were keen on what this should look like. And I was coincidentally out in Nevada and met the owners of Spring Mountain. John Morris is the managing partner, and he and
This is in Pahrump. This
Pahrump,
is outside
yes,
of Las
45,
Vegas.
45 miles west of Vegas. He and his partner, Brad.
I do have to interject before you go down this tangent for another Bob Lutz story,
Okay.
specifically with that ZR1. The C7 had just come out. He had a
Oh.
C6
Yeah.
ZR1.
Yeah.
And so I'm at Bob's house, and I show up, and this is an early production car. Like, none of them were in the street yet. So I show up, and I said, hey, Bob. He lives out in the sticks in Michigan. So he's living on this, like, farm road. I said, hey, Bob, let's get the ZR1 out, and I'll bring out the C7. We'll do a drag race. He looks at me and goes, I'd wax your ass.
I'm not surprised.
Anyway, you were saying about Pahrump.
Anyway, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So I had, and I honestly, I think I was out there. I was in Pahrump with Gary Pratt, and we heard about this Motorsport Country Club, and Gary and I ended up. And I'm not a golfer. Gary Pratt's a great golfer.
I knew I liked you for a reason.
Yeah. We ended up going to Mountain Springs to play golf, and there was this Motorsport Country Club across the road. Anyway, I met the ownership there. The managing partner is John Morris, his family, and his brother-in-law Brad Rambo. They became owners of that facility in 2004 and have absolutely transformed into a magnificent
It's a great facility.
Yes, it is. Now over 9 miles of track.
Very
So-
technical at that.
Yes, indeed, and which is part of the madness in the design. Yes. Anyway, we began talking about a Corvette school. They had some Corvettes and some Radicals and some Lotuses they were doing schools with, and I knew that Chevrolet was looking at. How do we go about doing this? Getting that ownership experience, driver training for owners of the ZR1, 6th generation ZR1. And that's really how it started. And Scott Clark, who was head of Michelin then, he pledged his support as well. And working with Chevy, we started the ZR1 school really in support of the ZR1 owners in October of 2008. And that's kind of how the Ron Fellows Performance Driving School began. And
Which has expanded to Cadillac now.
Cadillac, and then also through that process, they learned that this is such a great thing to do for owners. Let's not just make it for the highest performing Corvette model. Every single Corvette owner. So through 7th and 8th generation, every single owner gets the opportunity to
Gets the opportunity, or it comes fitted as standard.
It's part of the ownership experience where.
So I buy a new Corvette basic car.
Yes.
I get to meet.
Yeah, it's for the C8, for example, it's a $3,800.
Oh, it's an option, so you're paying extra for it.
You as the owner pay $1,000. Chevrolet pays the rest.
Oh,
Yes.
quite a deal.
Yes.
So Mr. Lutz is going to come see you. Actually, he just got a C8.
Oh, did he?
Yes,
Oh,
he
I
did.
love.
Got a C8 Bourbon. Bob,
I-
man wants to see you on track.
Yes, please, Mr. Lutz. We sat next to each other at one of the. I think it was a banquet of some sort, and you congratulated me on I think the six that RF edition Z06 won an award at the Chicago Auto Show,
Yeah.
and
Oh, probably Motor Week Driver's Choice.
yeah, something,
Yeah.
and this one was in February, I think, of 2007, and I sat with him at I think it was a Motorsport Hall of Fame And I sat next to him, and he said, "Congratulations on that car of yours, and
Good luck.
you should be happy. The good news is we sold them all." So,
Let me give you a piece of advice. Bring a cigar.
yeah, right.
He'll
Yes,
appreciate that.
yes. Okay.
He
Good news.
likes Milano V's.
Milano V's.
Olivia Milano V's.
Okay,
That's his
I'll
favorite.
look it up.
Yes,
Yeah,
please do.
thank you.
Let me
Anyway.
right now. We'll get you
Yes.
on it. Okay, so that's Pahrump. That's
So, yes.
Nevada.
So
We're in
it's-
Canada right now.
Yes, no, I get it. So we get the school going. Get Dave Petrie was the general manager, another Canadian. He actually worked here, coincidentally. Dave was in Pahrump working as a GM for the facility. A guy by the name of Rick Malone was one of the instructors. He and I hit it off, and I felt like this is the guy that needs to be the chief instructor and never look back. We're similar in age, and Rick's just a terrific guy, tons of energy. And, we went from, I don't know, 7 or 8, maybe 9 instructors to now we've got over 30. And the facility has evolved to, as the school has grown, the facility has grown as well to support the school, and it's increased. We're doing right now we're doing about 54 students. We do three groups of 18 simultaneously on 3 different portions of the track, and 4 or 5 days a week.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this brings us all full circle. Kind of brings your career full circle.
Yes, it does.
At the beginning of this discussion, I asked you, are you a businessman or a race car driver? First, you said race car driver.
Yeah.
But now I've had the foresight of this conversation. I'd argue you're more of a businessman, a successful one at that. So you were able to take your passion that you found at 11 years old of racing.
Mm-hmm.
You merged it with business skill. What are 3 aspects that led to the success of Ron Fellows?
1, 2, and 3 are the same. People
Which people?
who people like Bob McGraw, AER. People taking a chance on Ron Fellows and believing in him, and our the Herb Bischels and the ability to be able to take the what I learned as a racing driver into partnerships in a high performance driving school, and ownership of what I consider to be an absolute icon in Canadian sports, and that's this facility. This track remains a bucket list track for drivers around the globe. They don't make them like this anymore, and it has the lessons that I learned, and there's a long list of other drivers that will say the same thing. When I learned how to go fast and win here, translate it every place else, and I think that's key. So but
people,
it's
1, 2, and 3 people.
yeah, it's all the people you meet and who have had a big influence on me. There's in the support they have provided, the belief in I and the people around me, my wife and whatnot, that we did what we said we were going to do.
Okay.
So,
Ron, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I've
Thanks,
really enjoyed
MotoMan.
this to finally meet you. Yes, sir.
thank you.
And welcome to our special secret club, by the way.
Which we can't talk about.
We can't talk about that, yes. Until we see you in the next episode, bis später.